I had just received the phone call that would make us millionaires, erasing every worry we'd ever had. But standing outside my own home, a single overheard whisper shattered my world and revealed my husband's ultimate betrayal. The phone call came on a Tuesday, wedged between a soul-crushing spreadsheet and a lukewarm cup of coffee. It was from a lawyer with a clipped, professional voice, talking about my great-aunt Mildred. I barely remembered her, just a faint scent of lavender and mothballs from a family gathering when I was 6. But apparently, Aunt Mildred had remembered me, and she had left me everything. When the lawyer said the number, I had to ask him to repeat it. Twice. The sound of it didn't compute in my brain, a brain currently occupied with calculating whether we could afford to fix the leaky roof and the car's transmission this month. The number he quoted could fix our entire street of leaky roofs. It could buy a fleet of cars with transmissions that purred like kittens. It was the kind of money that didn't just solve problems, it erased them. I mumbled a thank you, my hand shaking so hard I could barely hang up the phone. For a full minute, I just stared at the wall, the spreadsheet blurring into a meaningless grid of lines. A single tear tracked its way down my cheek, followed by another, and then I was sobbing. Not with sadness, but with a tidal wave of relief, so profound it felt like I was drowning in it. All the pressure, all the second jobs, all the polite but firm calls from debt collectors, the constant gnawing anxiety that had become the background music to my life with my husband, Mark. It could all just stop. Mark. I had to tell Mark. I grabbed my bag, abandoning my work without a second thought, and practically sprinted to my car. The drive home was a blur of giddy, frantic energy. I was composing the scene in my head. I wouldn't just blurt it out. I'd walk in, he'd see the look on my face and ask what was wrong. He'd be worried, his brow furrowed in that way I loved, and I would take his hands, look him right in his tired, beautiful blue eyes and say, "Honey, you can quit your job at the warehouse. We're free." I imagined the weight lifting from his shoulders. For 5 years, we'd been fighting to stay afloat. A health scare he'd had early in our marriage had wiped out our savings and left us with a mountain of medical debt. He'd taken on extra shifts, his body aching, his spirit slowly being crushed by the physical labor, all while I worked my office job and picked up freelance writing gigs at night. We were a team, a fortress against the world, but the walls were starting to crumble. This inheritance wasn't just money. It was a rescue helicopter airlifting us out of a war zone. We could finally have the life we talked about in hushed, hopeful whispers late at night. A real honeymoon, not just a weekend at a cheap motel. Maybe even start trying for a baby without the terrifying fear of how we'd afford it. Pulling into our driveway, I saw his car was already there. Good. He must have gotten off early. A fresh surge of adrenaline shot through me. I killed the engine, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wanted to make this perfect. I fumbled for my keys, my hands still trembling with a mixture of shock and elation. I was so caught up in my fantasy of his reaction that I didn't notice the front door was already slightly ajar until I was right on top of it. That's when I heard the voices. His voice low and conspiratorial, and another voice, a woman's. My stomach did a slow, sick lurch. It was his mother, Brenda. I paused, my key hovering just inches from the lock. I shouldn't eavesdrop, but something in their tone made the hair on my arms stand up. It wasn't the sound of a casual mother-son chat. "You have to be careful, Mark," Brenda was saying, her voice a sharp, venomous whisper. "If she finds out before you're ready to leave, she could make things very difficult." Leave? My blood ran cold. My entire body went rigid. Then I heard Mark's voice, and the words he spoke shattered my world into a million tiny, irreparable pieces. "Don't worry, Mom, she doesn't suspect a thing. She's so wrapped up in her little fantasy of us against the world. It's almost pathetic. Just a little longer. Once the settlement from my real job comes through, I can finally tell her it's over. I've already got the new apartment. Sarah is getting tired of waiting. The house keys, slick with sweat, slipped from my nerveless fingers. They hit the stone porch with a sharp metallic clatter that sounded as loud as a gunshot in the sudden, suffocating silence. The clatter of metal on stone echoed in the dead air. Inside, the voices stopped. A floorboard creaked. My heart seized in my chest, a frantic fist pounding against my ribs. They heard me. They knew. In that split second, instinct took over. The giddy joy I'd felt was vaporized, replaced by a cold, primal need to survive. I lunged, snatching the keys from the porch, just as the doorknob began to turn. I forced my lips into a smile so wide it felt like my face would break, schooling my features into a mask of pure, unadulterated happiness. The door swung open. Mark stood there, his face a canvas of surprise that quickly curdled into irritation. Behind him I could see Brenda, his mother, peering over his shoulder like a vulture, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Honey, you're home!" My voice was a shrill, unnatural thing, but it was the best I could do. I launched myself at him, wrapping my arms around his neck, burying my face in the crook of his shoulder. It was a desperate move to hide the treacherous tears welling in my eyes and to avoid looking at the face of the man who had just emotionally annihilated me. He was stiff, his arms staying at his sides for a moment before he patted my back awkwardly. "Hey, what's gotten into you?" he asked, gently pushing me back. I thought I heard something fall. "Oh, that was just me," I laughed, a brittle, sharp sound. "Silly me. I was so excited to see your car that I fumbled my keys." I held them up, shaking them a little, a desperate piece of evidence for my lie. Brenda's gaze was sharp, dissecting me. "You look a bit frantic, dear." "I am frantic," I said, stepping past Mark into our living room, into the scene of my own execution. I had to control this. I had to own this moment before it owned me. Frantic with good news. I have the most incredible, unbelievable news. I turned to face them. The two people I had trusted most in the world, now revealed as my personal Judas and his cheerleader. I saw it all with horrifying new clarity. The subtle way Mark's eyes wouldn't quite meet mine, the triumphant curl of his mother's lip. The love I'd felt for him just 10 minutes ago had curdled into a thick, toxic sludge in the pit of my stomach. "Sit down," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Both of you. You need to be sitting for this." They exchanged a quick, unreadable glance before perching on the edge of our worn-out sofa. They looked like a pair of conspirators, caught in the headlights. Good. Let them wonder. I took a deep, shaky breath and launched into the speech I had rehearsed in the car, each word now dripping with a bitter, secret irony. "Mark, honey, all our worries, all the stress about money, it's over." His brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "What are you talking about? Did you get that promotion?" "Something so much better," I said, my eyes locked on his. I watched him, searching for the man I thought I married, but he was gone. Only a stranger remained. "I got a phone call today. It was a lawyer. My great-aunt Mildred passed away, and she left everything to me." The silence in the room was thick. I could hear Brenda let out a small, dismissive huff, as if I'd just announced I'd inherited a collection of antique spoons. Mark was impatient. "Okay, and what exactly is everything?" This was it. The moment that would change everything, but not in the way I had dreamed. I looked straight into the eyes of the man who called me pathetic, the man who was trading our 5 years for a new apartment and a woman named Sarah. And I told him the number, the full, 7-figure, life-destroying, life-creating number. The transformation was immediate and grotesque. Brenda's perfectly painted mouth fell open. But it was Mark's reaction that turned my blood to ice. There was no relief for Yus, no joy for our shared future. His eyes lit up with a raw, predatory fire. It was pure, distilled greed. I could literally see the gears turning in his head, recalculating his escape plan, not for our sake, but for his. "Are you "Are you serious?" he whispered, surging to his feet and grabbing my shoulders. His touch felt like a brand. "Tell me you're not joking." "I have the lawyer's name and number right here," I said, my voice hollow. He let out a bark of laughter that sounded completely manufactured. He pulled me into a crushing hug, his voice booming next to my ear. "Baby, this is it. We're rich. You did it." "You did it. Not we did it." The words struck me like a slap. Over his shoulder, I saw Brenda's face. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a smug, triumphant smirk she aimed directly at her son. They thought they had won. They thought my inheritance was their ticket. I pulled away, the fake smile plastered back on my face. "You can quit that horrible warehouse job, Mark, first thing tomorrow." "You bet I will," he said, his eyes gleaming. He glanced at his mother. "Actually, I might have to go in one last time. Got a big project I need to wrap up, tie off a few loose ends. Wouldn't want to leave them in the lurch." The settlement. His real job. The money he was going to use to fund his new life with Sarah. My stomach churned. He wasn't leaving me now. Oh no, the prize was too big. He was going to stay, play the loving husband, and figure out a way to take it all. After Brenda left, showering me with syrupy, fake affection, Mark went to take a shower, humming loudly off-key. The shock that had paralyzed me began to crystallize into a cold, hard diamond of resolve in my chest. He thought I was a pathetic fool. He thought I was his golden goose. He was about to learn how wrong he was. He came out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist, radiating a smug energy. "I've been thinking," he announced, running a hand through his wet hair. "We need to celebrate. Properly. That new place downtown, the Gilded Cage. I'll make a reservation for Friday. We can start planning our new life." The air left my lungs. The Gilded Cage. I'd seen the name on our credit card statement that very morning. A non-refundable deposit for a private room. For this Friday. I had dismissed it as a fraudulent charge. But I knew now. It wasn't for our new life. It was for his. He had booked that room to break my heart and celebrate his freedom with Sarah. And now, without a flicker of shame, he was repurposing the scene of my intended execution into a celebration, so sure of my ignorance. "That sounds perfect, honey," I said, my voice smooth as silk. He smiled, satisfied, and went to the closet. My eyes fell on his work jacket, the one from the warehouse, slung over a chair. He always guarded it so carefully. He said it was because it got so dirty, but now I knew that was a lie. With my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs, I quietly walked over to it while his back was turned. My fingers brushed against something hard in the inside pocket. I slipped my hand in and pulled out a small, slim leather billfold. It wasn't his wallet. Inside, there wasn't cash. There was just a single crisp, new-looking business card. The card was for a high-end condominium complex on the other side of town, and printed neatly beneath the logo were two names, Mark Peterson and Sarah Jensen. Seeing their names together, printed in crisp, professional lettering, was like a final, brutal confirmation. It wasn't just a fling, it was a plan, a whole parallel life built on a foundation of my trust. I slipped the card back into his jacket pocket just as he turned around, my movements so silent and fluid they were born of pure adrenaline. The next 2 days were an exercise in Oscar-worthy acting. I was the doting, excited wife. I listened with a placid smile as he talked about luxury cars and tropical vacations, all the while knowing he was picturing another woman in the passenger seat. Brenda called constantly, offering advice on investments, her voice dripping with a proprietary sweetness that made my skin crawl. They were circling two sharks who thought they'd found a bleeding seal. They had no idea the seal had grown teeth. I didn't just sit there. The morning after my discovery, I made 2 phone calls. The first was back to the lawyer, confirming every detail of the inheritance and asking for a recommendation. The second was to the person he recommended, a sharp, no-nonsense divorce attorney named Diana. I spent Thursday afternoon in her office, laying out the entire sordid story, from the overheard conversation to the business card. Diana listened, her expression growing colder and more determined with every word. When I finished, she looked at me, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. "He has no idea what's coming," she said, and we started to plan. Friday night arrived. Mark was buzzing with an almost manic energy. He got a fresh haircut. He wore his best suit, the one I had saved for months to buy him for our 3rd anniversary. It felt like a deliberate insult. As I got ready, I looked at my own reflection. The grief and shock had receded, replaced by a glacial calm. I chose a dress, a sleek blood red number that I'd always felt was too bold for me. Tonight, it felt like armor. We arrived at the Gilded Cage. It was exactly as pretentious as it sounded. Dark wood, low lighting, and hushed, reverent staff. The hostess led us to a private room in the back, secluded and intimate. The very room he'd booked to destroy me. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He ordered a ludicrously expensive bottle of champagne, raising his glass as soon as it was poured. "To our new beginning," he said, his eyes glinting with avarice. "To us." I raised my glass, meeting his gaze over the rim. "To new beginnings," I echoed, my voice steady, "and to getting everything we deserve." I took a small sip. He drained his glass in one go. For the next hour, I let him talk. He laid out our future, his future, with my money. A penthouse apartment, a European tour, an early retirement. He was so caught up in his fantasy, he didn't notice I was barely touching my food, or that my smile never quite reached my eyes. "You know, there's just one thing," I said, interrupting his monologue about a yacht he wanted to buy. I casually took a large manila envelope from my purse and slid it across the table. "Before we really start this new life, I need you to sign some paperwork, just legal stuff. The lawyers for the estate insist on it, something about protecting the assets for a married couple." He eyed the envelope with a flicker of suspicion, but his greed won out. "Of course, baby. Anything." He opened the clasp and pulled out the sheaf of papers. I watched his face as he read the first page. The smug satisfaction slowly drained away, replaced by confusion, then dawning horror. His jaw went slack. The color vanished from his cheeks. He was staring at divorce papers, my petition, citing adultery. "What is this?" he choked out, his voice a strangled whisper. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" "The only joke," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level, "was me believing you ever loved me. I heard you, Mark. I heard you and your mother on Tuesday. I know about Sarah. I know about the apartment." I pulled the business card from my purse and flicked it onto the table. It landed right next to his champagne flute. "And I know about the settlement from your real job you were waiting on before you could finally dump your pathetic wife." He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "This inheritance," I continued, leaning forward, "is mine. In this state, a direct inheritance is not considered marital property. It belongs solely to the beneficiary. My lawyer, a very, very good one, has already firewalled every single penny. You won't see a dime." He finally found his voice. "You can't do this. After everything I've done for us." "For us?" I laughed, a real bitter laugh this time. "You were building a life raft for yourself and your mistress while leaving me to drown. You didn't love me. You loved the idea of me as your struggling sidekick. But the story's over, Mark. The sidekick just became the hero, and you're the villain." Just then, the door to our private room opened. A woman stood there, looking confused. She was pretty, in a bland sort of way. I recognized her from a picture I'd glimpsed on Mark's phone weeks ago and dismissed. Sarah. "Mark, I got your text to meet you here," she began. Then her eyes fell on me. Her face clouded with confusion. I smiled at her, a wide, genuine smile. "Sarah, isn't it? So glad you could make it. Mark was just about to sign our divorce papers. Seems he's going to be needing that new apartment sooner than he thought. Just a heads up, though, the funding for it seems to have evaporated. I stood up, dropping my napkin onto my untouched plate. I looked at Mark one last time. He was pale, trembling, staring at the papers as if they were a death sentence. He had lost everything in the span of 5 minutes. I felt nothing. No pity, no lingering affection. Just the clean, cold emptiness of a chapter finally, definitively closed. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving the ruins of my old life behind me in that gilded cage. The night air was cool on my skin. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like I could breathe. I was free, and I was rich. It was a much better ending than the one he had written for me.